So here I was trying to figure out how the hell I'm gonna record my next video on TDX, which is a big one related to Nightmare Mode, when all of a sudden John Roblox decides to drop this here beautiful Black Friday update, which has a bunch of nice sales, but the highlight of the update is that they finally added oil into the game. And no, I'm not talking about the guy who was in there for a long while, I'm talking about the oil tower. Yeah, you can finally deploy this guy so that he can start drilling for oil on your battlefield while you're busy slaving away trying not to die to Dr. Xenon's forces. Now, this in itself sounds really cool, especially with the idea that he either generates cash per second or cash per damage, which basically means that the more damage you deal to an enemy, the more cash you get. And like, that's all fine and dandy, until people discover just how bad this tower really is. I mean, come on, I'm just gonna put this chart that I stole on the screen, and it shows all the rates of this tower upon release. John claimed that he did not want to power creep farm, and he wanted to keep the tower as balanced as possible to not break the game, but the rates shown on this chart not only show that the tower is incredibly inefficient in generating money, but it also takes it over 15 minutes to pay itself back. Technically, it's 12 minutes for top path because it's cheaper, but it's a lot longer on bottom path, so I'm just drawing an average over here. And as much as I tried to defend this by the idea that, oh, but the tower has a damage multiplier, so if you put more towers, it's just gonna deal more damage, the math was done, and it turns out that no, you barely make a tenth back of what you're supposed to make in order to get any value out of this tower, regardless of what damage source you plan to use. So now we're stuck with a tower almost as expensive as the freaking Behemoth that just underperforms in every possible way. He's mine layer level. He literally gets power crept by farm, a tower that has existed in this game since release. How did we get here? However, in light of recording this video, it has received a very extensive buff that has pretty much increased its cash output throughout both paths. Bottom path actually generates somewhat valuable cash because of its increased multiplier, which is more than double now. It has way more HP because apparently John forgot to include it in balancing, which, like, dude. And now top path is much better for early game, however it's still centralized around the mechanic of stalling in order to make the most profit. And I'll be honest, I am not a fan of stalling being a main point of consideration in this kind of game. Tower Defense X prides itself on being more fast-paced compared to other tower defense games because you're constantly meant to be on your toes, always ready to intercept the next threat in the most strategic way possible. And stalling just takes all the hype out of it, and it turns into a very slow, almost turn-based game. I guess you can get some value out of stall-based gameplay, as we've seen proof, and there's also the consideration that it can be useful in multiplayer for somebody that dedicates their whole time to farming. We all know there's just that one person in your party. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. The main point here is that with the release of the Oil Derrick and its rebalance, there are a few lessons that need to be learned. First of all, what I might consider to be a hot take is that I'm actually okay with towers being released underpowered, and then after public reaction, they get buffed to an acceptable state. This is more so Clash Royale reasoning, because then that way, whatever is added into the game doesn't instantly break it and result in a nerf, which makes it seem like a lazy cash grab. At least here, the developers can inspect how the tower settles into the meta, and then decide based on the public perception what kind of changes they need to make. However, a lesson that the developers need to learn out of this is that despite having assets that have been finished for years at this point, there's always the need to proof check and re-verify as much as possible. You need to be sure that whatever you're adding can fit into this game's meta and that it's not missing any key elements such as its HP value, which kind of dictates most of its worth in the game outside of what it's actually supposed to do. In light of all of this excitement in the TDX community, I just felt compelled to make a video on this matter. I've played with the Derrick myself after the buff, and it's honestly not bad. You've seen the background footage for yourselves. But anyways, now I'm gonna go back to working on a bigger video, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to me ranting for a bit. You have a good one, and hopefully some lessons were learned. Bye bye.